Hello, today is September 15th, and I'm Tammy Sloop, Regional Editor for Shaw Media, and we're here with Todd Martin, who is running for State's Attorney in LaSalle County as a Democrat. We're also joined by Editor Derek Barkello. Thanks for meeting with us today, Todd.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and why don't you start off by providing us or talking a little bit about your background and what you bring to the table.
Okay. Well, I'm a lawyer that has 26 years of experience, most of which is in LaSalle County. I started my career in the LaSalle County State's Attorney's Office as a traffic prosecutor. I did that job for approximately 1 year, and then I moved to the felony division, and I prosecuted felons for approximately 3 years. I left the State's Attorney's Office and went to the law firm of Herbolsheimer, Lannon, Henson, Duncan, and Reagan in LaSalle, and I was with them for approximately 10 years. While I was with the Herbolsheimer law firm, Herbolsheimer represented LaSalle County in civil issues, and I did some work for the county while I was at Herbolsheimer. In 2007, I went back to the LaSalle County State's Attorney's Office as Chief Deputy in charge of violent crime, and I did that job until 2012 when our civil assistant became a circuit judge, and then I moved from the Chief Deputy position in charge of violent crime to the civil position, and I represented the county board from 2012 until 2016. I have a private practice in Mendota that I established when I moved over to the civil position in 2012. So I've been practicing law in Mendota since 2012. It's a general practice.
Okay. Why don't you tell us why you're running for State's Attorney?
I'm running for LaSalle County State's Attorney in order to restore integrity to the decision-making process of the LaSalle County State's Attorney's Office. With my broad background and experience, I have the ability to mend relationships with local law enforcement agencies and restore their confidence in decisions that are made by the office.
You mentioned experience as a common theme, and can you speak to how important experience is to the Office of State's Attorney?
In my opinion, it's the most important aspect of the position. You lead by example as State's Attorney. The State's Attorney's position is not an entry-level job. It's not meant to be, and obviously from the salary that the State's Attorney's paid, it's not designed as an entry-level position. You are looked up to by everyone else in the office for advice, for guidance, and mentoring. If you don't have the ability to provide those things, that's a huge problem. If the guy who's in charge of the office doesn't know what to do in a particular situation, that's a problem. There needs to be somebody in that office that can instill confidence in the young attorneys that are just starting out and, guide them so that they're able to learn and make decisions on their own.
And this next question dovetails off of that. What do you believe needs to change in the office? And we're speaking of both short-term and long-term goals, procedures, etc.
First and foremost, I believe that the relationship that the office has with law enforcement needs to be fixed. It needs to be repaired because you have law enforcement who doesn't have confidence in decisions that are made. There's mistakes that are being made on serious cases that, whether they're victim cases or victimless cases, they affect somebody. So, it's one thing to make a decision or a mistake on a drug case where a drug offender is let go. It's a completely different scenario to make a mistake on a drug delivery case where there's victims. There's other people that are being victimized, or a burglary or an assault case, something of that nature. So there needs to be some confidence between local law enforcement and the decisions that are made at the office. And there needs to be confidence in decisions made by the office from people who are victims or victimized by crime. I've heard from several people that, my burglary case wasn't given particular attention because the office had something else going on. You have to prioritize situations, and you have to prioritize cases. And quite frankly, I think this administration spent a lot of time on cases that they shouldn't have spent time on.
Examples?
The Kenny Cusick case is the biggest example. The auditor's employees. When you have a murder trial that you get a not guilty in less than 2 hours, that'll tell you the strength of the case.
And you had mentioned law enforcement. How would you describe your relationship with law enforcement?
Well, I'll start by saying I have two brothers that are police officers, one who is with the Mendota Police Department and one who is with the Sheriff's Department. I've also been around the state's attorney's office the majority of my career. Some of these people are my friends, and they have confidence in the job that I did when I was in the state's attorney's office. And, I think they still have confidence in my ability. The way I'll answer your question as best as I can is, don't take my word for it. Go out and talk to the police. Ask them what they think of me. Ask them what they think of my reputation and my ability to make decisions. Law enforcement, I believe I have their support. And I can tell you definitively, when it came time to put signs up for the primary and to put signs up in the general, I've had a lot of police officers volunteering time to help me do that.
It could be perceived by some that a state's attorney's job is mostly centered on criminal matters, but the office also handles civil matters. I think maybe you said during the primary, you said maybe it was a 30-70 ratio. Can you speak a little bit to the civil side of the job?
Yes, and I will speak particularly about one incident that's just happened. You had the referendum that was going to go on the ballot for the removal of the auditor, the removal of the elected auditor. That came off of the ballot because a mistake was made in the way the county board put forth the resolution or the referendum. And I can't speak to Karen Donnelly and her process because I'm not there. But when I was the attorney who represented the county board, every county board meeting I attended, I sat there for the entirety of the meetings, and they relied on you for advice. Most of these guys and women are not attorneys. They're not even close to being attorneys, and they don't claim to be. They rely on advice given to them by the state's attorney's office to make decisions and to make sure procedures and things of that nature are being taken care of appropriately. So you need to advise the county board that, look, this is how you do it, and you can't do it more than a year before the general election. And half of that advice evidently was conveyed. The other issue is, when it comes to county board, everything is tax driven, and you have an obligation to the taxpayer to make sure things are done appropriately and the money is spent appropriately and things are not out of control. So yeah, I think I did say 70-30 split between criminal and civil. That may not be hard and fast rule numbers, but it's somewhere close to that. There's a big portion of the job that it is in the civil division, because when mistakes get made in the civil division, it's all about money there.
And changing the subject just a little bit, if given the jurisdiction, would you enforce COVID-19 restrictions?
What I will say is every case will be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I'm not going to put out a blanket statement saying I'm not going to enforce restrictions. I think that's ludicrous to do that. Those restrictions are put in place, I'm assuming, based upon strong medical advice. You know, I would tend to tell you that I would enforce restrictions, but it's going to depend on what the circumstance is. You know, the job of the state's attorney is to protect the public in general. And, you know, you hear about, the first one I heard about, and this might be a poor example, but was at the University of Alabama, where they were having COVID-19 parties. And I don't know if you guys heard about this or not, but they pooled money up, and the first one to get COVID-19 won the pot. In that situation, I think, yeah, I would enforce the restrictions. You know, if it's a mistake or something like that, it becomes a more difficult question to answer. But I will say that overall, I think the restrictions are there for a purpose, and they're meant to be enforced. I think a lot of that is going to be on the health department rather than the state's attorney's office. But, you know, if it comes to criminal sanctions, and criminal sanctions are allowed in certain instances, they'll be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I'm a small business owner myself. Right now, I've got a sign on my door that says face masks required. You know, is it going to help? I don't know. But is it not going to help? I don't know the answer to that question either. And I'd rather err on the side of caution than not.
Sure. What is the office's role in helping keep defendants out of the criminal justice system?
Well, and I'm assuming what you're referring to is alternative treatment courts and things of that nature. Obviously, the penal system is a rehabilitative system first and foremost, and then a punishment system secondly. So, you know, somebody who gets themselves in trouble for the very first time and have had no other exposures to criminal offenses, they're treated differently than people who are recidivists and have been in there repeatedly. It becomes again, a case-by-case situation where you have to assess somebody's criminal history and make a decision on what you think they're going to do in the future. Can they be rehabilitated? Is this a mistake, something that silly that they did? Or is it the type of person, before I left the criminal division and moved to the civil division, there was a gentleman that was involved, and I use that word loosely, gentleman, loosely, because he wasn't a gentleman, but he was involved in a murder. And I told him point blank, and his attorney, my goal is to lock you up until you die, because he was a bad guy. He did not deserve to live amongst everybody else who obeys the law, goes to work, you know, and spends their money on items that they enjoy. There's some people that just, you're not going to keep out of the system. But in relation to drug cases and things of that nature, you have to make a distinction between people who are drug dealers and people who are drug users. Now, a drug user will occasionally sell to friends and things of that nature in small quantities, and that's part and parcel of the environment. But when you have people who are not drug users and all they do is sell drugs, that's a problem. So, you know, it becomes a cost-benefit analysis, to be perfectly honest with you. Is the benefit from putting somebody in an alternative treatment court greater than the cost of doing so? And if the answer is yes, then absolutely. I support drug court, but am I of the opinion that everybody should be entitled to drug court? Absolutely not.
And what should the state's attorney's role be in curbing opioid abuse or some of the harsher drugs that have inflicted our county?
The state's attorney is the gatekeeper, and you have to do what you can to try and rehabilitate people. It's one thing if somebody is continuously using drugs and they're doing it and this is a poor example because when you throw hypotheticals out there, it's hard to cover all the facts. But, in this hypothetical, I'll say, somebody who's using drugs in their own home and not affecting anybody other than themselves versus somebody who's using drugs and then driving down the interstate. You've got two distinctly different situations there where the second drug user is potentially causing harm to other people. So, it's a difficult question to answer, but I think you do what you can to rehabilitate them first and then to penalize them second.
Do you believe LaSalle County and the state should aim to reduce incarceration rates? And kind of dovetailing with that, what's your position on cash bail? Do you believe that needs to be reformed?
Well, there's been a lot of studies and there's a lot of talk about that. The first and foremost question is, what's it going to take to protect the general public? And then you look at the individual offender. Does cash bail need to be reformed? It has somewhat here recently, but cash bail is intended to, I guess, primarily ensure somebody's attendance at court, and secondarily, deal with very dangerous people. Obviously, when you have murder cases and things of that nature, the bail set in those cases is extremely higher than somebody who, commits a criminal damage to property or something of that nature. I think there's been efforts to reform the cash bail situation, but you have to strike a balance with what is it going to take to ensure somebody comes to court versus, what is an oppressive bail amount that's keeping somebody in jail and not allowing them to go to work. So it's a balancing act.
With the social unrest that we're seeing across the country, do you believe the state's attorney's office has a duty to reduce racial disparities in the criminal legal system?
I think everybody has a duty to reduce racial disparities. The question becomes, how can the state's attorney do that? I wish I had an answer for you, but I'm going to whiff on this question, to be perfectly honest with you, because I don't know specifically what they can do to do that. I know, be a better human being, treat people better. But the flip side of that coin is, with all the rioting that's going on, with all the damaging that's being done, if it's being done in the name of some group or organization, does that make it right? I'm going to tell you point blank, no, it doesn't. In my opinion, it doesn't. And, if you're a member of a group that burns a place down and we're able to prove that you're the individual involved, expect to be prosecuted. Point blank, expect to be prosecuted.
Can you speak to the importance of transparency in your office, and how would you fulfill that responsibility to the public?
That's an interesting question. And yes, it's important that the office is transparent, and it's important that the entire governmental process is transparent. But what I can tell you is, as the civil assistant, there was a period of time where I did nothing but answer FOIA requests, and they were voluminous. I put out probably tens of thousands of pages of documentation that I thought was, kind of ridiculous. So do I believe people are entitled to the documentation and people should have access to the documentation? Absolutely. But in my opinion, I think there needs to be a more effective way to get that done, whether it be make the stuff available on websites and things of that nature. And LaSalle County, when I was the civil assistant, did improve their website and things started to get better. But it needs to be something that when you have to take somebody away from their job for almost a full day to answer FOIA requests, that, in my opinion, is kind of excess. And the media can help with transparency also. You cover council meetings, you cover board meetings, and, if there's issues, you put them out there. And, I think the better way to approach this stuff is through information that's made available on the county or the state's attorney's website. But yeah, well, with the exception of criminal investigations and things of that nature, there shouldn't be anything secret going on in that office.
We talked about this a little during the primary as well, but it's probably good to have a refresher for those who are going to view the video. What's your position on civil forfeitures?
On civil forfeitures, I'm in favor of them, and I can't make it any more plain than that. We finally have an example that's going to ring a bell for people. And I don't know if you saw the number yet or not, but Trident recently had a cash seizure in Bureau County that was $9.2 million. That's going to make an effect on somebody. It's going to make an effect on somebody. So, when we prosecute people who have small amounts of drugs on the interstate, that's one thing. But when you take the money away from the drug dealers, that makes a significant impact. That makes them take notice and makes them rethink things. So absolutely, I'm in favor of it.
You never know, someone could claim it.
And you know what? If there's a legitimate explanation for it, that's all good and fine. Everybody seems to think that, the police are taking money away from the little old lady who just sold her house. If you have a legitimate explanation for where that money came from, it's not going to be kept. It's just that simple. But I think the example that I used before, and the one that I'll use again, is when you have $100,000 in cash shrunk wrapped and hidden in a 50-pound bag of dog food, when was the last time you carried money that way? And then when you were asked where it came from, well, it's just mine. There's no legitimate explanation for where those funds came from. And I know that the civil forfeiture gets a hard, takes a beating on the reputation aspect of it because, you're taking money away from people. When you hear the facts behind some of these cases, it's not as egregious as you think. Do I think it needs to be under control and things need to be monitored? Absolutely. I don't think that this should be done by any and everybody all over the place, but no, I'm in forfeiture, in favor of civil forfeiture.
You've talked a lot about conversations you've had with law enforcement and some of the issues they've brought up to you about the state's attorney's office. What are you hearing from just people out while you're talking to them, campaigning? What do they want out of a state's attorney? What are you hearing?
I'm getting a lot of questions about why were certain cases tried, and is it normal for those kinds of results? And my answer is no. What they're looking for is some kind of answer about how the decisions are made in the office now. And why was this case filed? Why was this case filed? What they want to know is that they're safe, and that there's going to be protection there. So the violent crimes need to be dealt with. There's people wanting to know, why somebody who committed an aggravated battery got this type of sentence or this type of an agreement. And, like I said, all cases are individually fact driven. So there's not one answer that's going to apply to every single case. But, what they want to know is that whoever is in that job is going to keep them safe.
Okay. We can kind of wrap things up here, but I did want to give you an opportunity to, explain why should people vote for you?
Well, people should vote for me because I am the experienced candidate. I have 26 years of experience as a licensed lawyer. I've worked in every division of the LaSalle County State's Attorney's Office, including the civil division. I've made decisions that I think are competent and rational. And, if you don't believe me, go out and talk to a police officer. And, I think I kind of made this joke before, and I'll make it again. I'm getting older now, so there's a lot of younger police officers out there that I don't know. But you may have to go up the chain of command a little bit to find somebody that knows me and is familiar with how I conducted myself when I was in the state's attorney's office, and talk to them, see what they have to think. But, the state's attorney's job is to protect people from crime, and also to protect them financially as taxpayers. You need to be on top of criminal issues that occur in the county, and you also need to pay attention to financial issues that are going on in the county. So I believe I have the experience and the ability to do that, and I believe that the biggest quality that I have, or the best quality that I have, is good common sense. And I can bring good common sense to the state's attorney's office and make decisions that are rational decisions that are in the best interest, quite frankly, of the tax-paying public in LaSalle County.
Okay. Well, thanks for spending some time with us, Todd. Really appreciate it. And just reminding everyone to vote on November 3rd. Do your research. Obviously, please come to Shaw Media for news and updates on all the elections in the area. And again, thank you very much, Todd.